The Microsoft AZ-104 exam nearly broke me. Azure is constantly evolving. Services change, documentation shifts, and it's hard to know what's actually important to study. I barely passed. I mean barely. I literally just hit the passing mark and got 700. And the pass mark was 700. Nevertheless, it's still a pass, alhamdulillah. And in this video, I'll walk you through exactly what I did to prepare, what worked, what didn't, and what I wish I'd done differently so I could have scored higher. Let's dive in. So let's start with what the AZ-104 exam actually covers, broken down into 3 core areas. First one being managing identities and governance in Azure. Second one, configuring virtual networks. Very important. We'll get into this later. And the third, monitoring and backing up resources. Now, when it comes to preparing for all of that, there are really 2 sides to learning. On one hand, you've got the theory, the reading, the videos, the Microsoft documentation, and just basically understanding how things should work. And then there's a hands-on side, and this is actually getting into Azure, spinning up resources, configuring settings, breaking things, and learning by actually doing stuff. Then if you're lucky, your day job might already give you some of that hands-on experience. But even if it doesn't, you really do need both. You've got to be able to really understand the concepts and apply them in a practical environment. And what I also find is, even if it is part of your day job, some of the settings and things you need to understand for the AZ-104 might not all be part of your day job. There's almost definitely some obscure settings that aren't used or have already been set up in the past, but you kind of just operate them now. Well, the knowledge needed to pass the exam requires you to understand it from a first principle basis on actually how to get things going and set it up for the first time. And the tricky part is Azure changes constantly, and that's what makes AZ-104 so challenging. And this is the issue I ran into. You'll find courses and guides and videos and books that look great on the surface, good reviews, solid content, but they're often outdated. And sometimes you'll spend hours learning something only to realize Microsoft has changed the UI, updated a feature, or even depreciated the service altogether, or renamed something entirely, so you'll understand it as one thing but now it's called something else. The best way to get around that, always cross-check what you're learning with the official Microsoft documentation and learning paths, because that's what will be up to date, and that's kind of your single source of truth. And then you can use other resources to supplement that. And when you're looking at things, stick to things that are up to date or have been updated very recently, and just focus on the bigger changes that affect like functionality, and don't worry too much about minor kind of cosmetic updates or like menu tweaks, because those things won't really affect the outcome or how you'd approach or answer a question. But yeah, that's kind of fundamental advice kind of going in. But stay tuned, because in the next section I'll dive into the study plan and what I would recommend, what resources I used, and what I definitely do differently if I was learning from scratch. Alright, so let's talk resources, what to use and how to actually prepare. I know I've touched on Microsoft resources, and that's definitely the first thing you need is Microsoft Learn. It's completely free. It's going to be your bread and butter. It's an official learning platform for Microsoft, and honestly it should be kind of your starting point and your main resource that you use throughout. It's broken up into modules like part of learning paths, and as you go you kind of earn points and track your progress. And if you find something on Microsoft Learn, then it's pretty much fair game for the exam. It will probably appear at some point. And it's not all just static blogs and articles. There are videos and interactive kind of elements to it. So don't just skim read it, take your time to really go through it carefully. And what I used and what I would recommend is Pluralsight, and this is where the learning for me got very hands-on. Now, I watched all the Pluralsight kind of learning paths on AZ-104, but to be honest I don't think that taught me much more than what I picked up on the Microsoft documentation. But what really sets it apart was the labs and the real-world simulations. So if you subscribe to the right tier on Pluralsight, you actually get these temporary kind of Microsoft accounts, and stuff will already be set up for you in there, and some stuff is a bit more blank and you have to kind of set it up yourself as you go through. But you'll get to create, configure, manage resources, in a sandboxed environment, and this is where the knowledge really begins to stick. Luckily, I get my Pluralsight access through work, but if you don't want to do that, you don't want to pay for a subscription, there is a 10-day free trial. So if you use that kind of smartly and cram everything into those 10 days, you could time it right and binge all the labs in kind of a 10-day window. And finally, another main resource I'd recommend just for learning is a John Savile's Exam Cram video on YouTube. It's like 3 hours and something long. And this is something I watched the night before my exam. But I'd probably recommend starting with this, then going to the Microsoft Learn, then Pluralsight, then finishing off with this again, just to really solidify that theory. It's fast-paced, packed with value. I really like the whiteboard approach it takes, where it kind of maps everything out and shows you how it links together. So yeah, no, that's really good stuff for kind of the labs, the resources, understanding the content. But what's actually an important and a very confusing area was the exam questions and preparing for the questions. So we'll get into that next, and the mindset you need to tackle them. What if your entire digital life can be private without giving up user convenience? Proton is an all-in-one privacy suite built in Switzerland and trusted by millions. While big tech mines your data, Proton lets you take back control. No ads, no tracking, just real security. You get Proton Mail to send encrypted email, Proton Drive for secure cloud storage, Proton VPN for private browsing, Proton Pass to protect your passwords, and even Proton Calendar, all synced and encrypted. Start for free with 1 gigabyte of secure email, file sharing, VPN, and even a Bitcoin wallet, or go unlimited for more storage. This plan is my personal favorite. Up to 15 email addresses and 10 high-speed VPN connections across all devices. And if you're ready to ditch surveillance software, then check out Proton in the links below. Get started for free or sign up for one of the paid plans for even more features. Reclaim your digital privacy today. Back to the video. So I found this app called AZ104 Study Prep or something like that. I'll put a screenshot on screen because I can't remember it off the top of my head right now. But it had like 5,000 AZ104 questions. And what I found was these questions were too easy and wasn't representative of the real exam. So going back, I don't think this really added much value other than just to test bits of knowledge. I did pay for the pro version thinking it was going to be better, but to be honest, it was just more super easy questions. And I didn't do 5,000, I think I did about 700. And to be honest, that was a waste of time. So yeah, I'd probably download some AZ104 app if you just search it in the App Store and just do the free questions just to test your knowledge. There are good and worse ones, and yeah, play around and try and find one. Also, you can look at like the Reddit pages for Azure certifications, search for AZ104 and look at what other question banks are recommended. Generally, the better ones you have to pay for. But yeah, I went in with a bad question bank prep. But what I will say is, to be honest, it didn't really matter. Other than the kind of style of questions, which did throw me off because, you know, I was doing multiple choice prep and the actual test was not as simple as just 4 options, ever. There was a few questions that were really that easy. You really have to understand the content, and there's particular areas of the content that you really need to understand with Microsoft Azure. And I really wish I'd spent more time on this going back, because they showed up everywhere on the exam. So the 2 areas that I wish I would have put more time into was networking. This is the first area. If I had to go back and just pick one thing that like would have make or break it for the exam, it would definitely be the networking section. Honestly, the whole exam felt like a full-blown networking exam in disguise, pretending to be an Azure certification. Almost every question required networking knowledge. Even questions that weren't directly about networking, which most of them were, still required you to understand how things like virtual networks, subnets, network security groups, firewalls, route tables, gateways, all interact and would affect the specific scenario you're given. The bottom line is you need a rock solid grasp of how networking works in Azure. Learn how traffic flows, what can and can't communicate, what would block what, and how to troubleshoot connectivity issues. Seriously, networking is just a non-negotiable to pass. You really have to understand it. I mean, the questions would literally be like lists and tables of VMs and specific networks and configurations and other Azure components and how they would affect it, and you'd have to understand what could talk to what to be able to begin to figure out what the actual question is. And it might be about something not related to networking, but that foundational understanding is required to even attempt the question. So yeah, definitely spend as much time as you can understanding how networking works in the Azure cloud. And the second area, and honestly, I thought I had a good grasp of this, but I realized how bad I was at it in the exam, and I was trying to learn while doing the questions, because you do have access to the Microsoft Learn documentation, and I was like going back and forth and trying not to waste too much time browsing the docs. But yeah, it's infrastructure as code, specifically Bicep and JSON files. You literally get questions where you're handed a Bicep or JSON file and you're asked to change something to make it work, or asked about what it does, or change one specific line, or can you change 3 lines to do something. Obviously I can't reveal the exact exam questions, but this is why I'm trying to talk around things. But to answer those, to understand what those lines do, how the parameters and the variables are structured, and how these changes will affect deployment, it's not just about understanding what those files are. It's about being able to read them with confidence and understand what's going on and make changes knowing exactly what that change will impact. So if you're building your study plan, put networking and infrastructure as code right at the top, because when the pressure's on during the exam, the surface level knowledge just won't cut it. You need to understand how it all fits together. I guess if I could summarize my advice in a nutshell, it would literally be do as many labs as you can, be as practical as you can, have a solid foundation of the theory, have a deep dive knowledge of all the networking elements, all the networking services and infrastructure and components within Azure, how they interact, what they do. At least be able to read and edit confidently Bicep and JSON files related to infrastructure deployments, and be able to understand the relationship between the different services. You know, it's not about learning a specific service or component in isolation. So learning about the kind of tentacles that spawn out of each of those services, what they touch, how they interact, how they're connected, and being able to do that all at once while being asked a question with a lot of context, a lot of different information about the IP configuration, the types of VMs, the infrastructure, the company context and what they're trying to do, the security rules, and yeah, just everything at once is just something you need to kind of cement together. I'm not trying to put people off taking the exam, because it's definitely worthwhile, but I really think for me, I struggled a lot, and I just want to kind of communicate the difficulty of the exam quite clearly, just so people don't go in underestimating it, because I certainly did. And like I said earlier, I literally scraped a pass. I scored on the passing mark, which was just crazy. But yeah, alhamdulillah, that's a wrap for this video. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope this helped you feel like you know what you need to do to prepare a little bit more confident if these areas are solid and something that you understand. And if you're getting ready to take it, best of luck. Inshallah, you pass, you've got this. And if you found this helpful, then please like, comment, share and subscribe. I'll be posting more tips, resources and honest takes on cybersecurity and certifications. So yeah, thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.